You're halfway up a flight of stairs and your legs start burning. Almost everyone has been taught to interpret that as damage, waste building up, something going wrong that you need to push through and then clear out. That interpretation is wrong, and it's been wrong for a long time. What your legs are making in that moment is fuel, and some of it goes to your brain. Let me build this up carefully because there are two versions of this story circulating, and only one of them holds up. I'm going to give you both, and I'm going to tell you which one I'd actually bet on. First, the basics. When your muscles work hard, they break down glucose faster than they can fully process it through the slow oxygen-dependent pathway. The intermediate that accumulates is pyruvate, and a lot of it gets converted to lactate. For most of the 20th century, lactate was cast as the villain. It was the cause of the burn, the cause of fatigue, a metabolic dead end your body had to dispose of. That picture has essentially collapsed. Lactate isn't a dead end. It's a transportable fuel. Your body moves it around between tissues and burns it where it's needed. And one of the places it goes is your head. Now here's where I have to separate two claims that often get blended together. Claim 1 is about what happens inside your brain. It's called the astrocyte neuron lactate shuttle. Astrocytes are support cells that vastly outnumber neurons. The hypothesis says astrocytes take up most of the glucose arriving in the brain, convert it into lactate, and hand that lactate to neurons, which then burn it for energy. It's an elegant idea. It's been enormously influential, and you'll find it stated as fact all over the internet. It is not settled. There's a substantial body of criticism. One prominent paper argues directly that the stoichiometry doesn't work. Essentially, the amounts don't add up. If neurons were really running mostly on astrocyte-supplied lactate, the oxygen and glucose consumption numbers measured in real brains would look different than they do. And more recent work has complicated it further, showing that neurons are more metabolically flexible than the original model assumed. They express the enzymes needed to handle lactate in both directions, and they can take up and use glucose directly during activity. So the field is genuinely split. Some researchers propose the shuttle runs the other way, from neurons to astrocytes, and there's evidence for that too. I'm not going to tell you which side is right because I don't know, and neither does the field yet. What I'll tell you is that if someone presents the astrocyte to neuron shuttle as established fact, they're skipping over a live argument. Now claim 2. And this is the one with much firmer ground under it. Claim 2 is about lactate arriving in your brain from your bloodstream. Not made inside the brain. Made by your muscles, released into circulation and carried up to your head. This has been measured directly in people. In one study, researchers worked with 6 healthy volunteers and measured cerebral lactate kinetics and oxidation rates. They tested 3 conditions. At rest with lactate infused to raise blood levels, and during cycling exercise. At rest, the brain was slightly releasing lactate. Under infusion, that reversed and the brain took lactate up, and glucose uptake dropped correspondingly. They calculated the contribution to the brain's total energy expenditure. At rest, about 8%. With raised blood lactate, 19%. During exercise, 27%. More than a quarter of what the brain was burning during exercise came from lactate that arrived through the blood. And they confirmed it was actually being used, not just taken up and stored, by tracking the labeled carbon and finding it came back out as carbon dioxide. That's the signature of something being fully oxidized, burned. Other work has found that the brain takes up lactate in direct proportion to how much is in the arterial blood. So the more your muscles make, the more your brain gets. There's another result I find genuinely striking. In a study of prolonged exercise, around 2 hours, researchers sampled blood going into the brain and blood coming out of it. Before exercise, the brain was a net releaser of lactate. After that prolonged exercise, it had switched to being a net taker. 12 out of 13 participants showed that flip. Your brain changed which fuel it was drawing on because of what your legs had been doing. So what happens to lactate once it's inside a neuron? The same thing that happens to most fuels. It gets converted back to pyruvate. Pyruvate enters the citric acid cycle. The cycle strips off electrons and hands them to the electron transport chain. The chain produces ATP. So this isn't some exotic alternative energy system. It's the same production line I talk about in every video. What's different is the delivery. Fuel made in one organ, shipped through the blood, and burned in another. Now let's talk about whether this does anything for you, and here I want to be careful. There is research linking exercise-induced lactate to cognitive improvement. 2 studies found acute exercise improved cognitive performance, and the size of that improvement correlated positively with how much lactate the brain took up. That's interesting. It is also a correlation in acute studies, mostly in young healthy men. It does not establish that the lactate caused the cognitive improvement. Exercise does a great many things at once, and untangling which one is responsible is hard. There's also preclinical work suggesting lactate acts as a signaling molecule, and not just a fuel, potentially touching pathways involved in mitochondrial biogenesis and brain-derived neurotrophic factor. I'm mentioning it because it's interesting, but I want to be explicit. That work is largely in animals. The authors themselves describe the findings as controversial, and I'm not going to build a recommendation on it. So here's what I'm comfortable saying. Your muscles make lactate when you work hard. That lactate enters your blood. Your brain takes it up in proportion to how much is there, and oxidizes it for energy, up to more than a quarter of its energy budget during exercise. That much has been measured in humans with careful methods, and I'd stand behind it. Which makes the free lever the simplest one I've given you. Move hard enough that you actually feel it. Not a stroll. Stairs instead of the lift. A hill. A walk fast enough that talking gets slightly difficult. Anything that produces the burn. Because the burn isn't damage. It's production. And your brain is on the receiving end. That costs nothing and nobody sells it. As for where my own recommendation sits, it's narrow as usual. Lactate arrives at the electron transport chain by a slightly different route than glucose, but it arrives at the same place. CoQ10 is one of the carriers in that chain, physically moving electrons between components so ATP can be produced. Levels decline as we age. I'm not claiming any supplement improves lactate transport or lactate metabolism. Nobody has shown that, and I'd rather say so than let the association do the work. So take the stairs first. That's the part with the strongest evidence in this entire video. And if you want to support the machinery the fuel arrives at, the link in the description below is an affiliate link to Mitochondrial, which is PQQ and CoQ10 with a 90-day money-back guarantee. If you like getting the contested version and the solid version clearly separated, subscribe. That's what this channel is for. This video is educational only, and it's not medical advice. Talk to your doctor before starting new or more intense exercise, especially if you have a heart condition or you've been inactive for a while.